In the 18th century, darkness arrived with authority. For a working-class family, sunset was not merely a change in the sky. It was a deadline. Every task that required careful hands, sharp vision, or movement beyond the doorway became more difficult once the last natural light faded. Long before electric bulbs, gas lamps, and brightly illuminated streets, ordinary people measured their evenings according to the fire, the candle, and the season. Imagine a cold evening in England during the 1770s. The sun is already sinking behind rows of uneven rooftops. Smoke hangs above the town, drifting from chimneys and workshops. The narrow streets are wet from an afternoon rain, and muddy water gathers near doorways. A laborer is walking home after a long day, his boots carrying dirt from the road and his clothes holding the smells of sweat, smoke, animals, and manual work. His name might be Thomas, though thousands of men lived lives much like his. He could be a dock worker, a farm laborer, a weaver, a porter, or an apprentice in one of the growing industrial towns. His wages are modest and unreliable. If work is plentiful, the family eats a little better. If illness, weather, or unemployment interrupts his income, even basic necessities become uncertain. Thomas does not return to a quiet house where the day's work has ended. When he pushes open the wooden door, the household is still active. The room is small, crowded, and dim. In many working-class homes, a single main room served several purposes. It was a kitchen, dining space, work area, sitting room, and sometimes a bedroom. The floor might be made of packed earth, worn boards, or rough stone. The walls could be damp, especially in winter, and the low ceiling trapped smoke from the hearth. His wife, Mary, has spent much of the day performing work that would rarely have been described as employment, even though it demanded nearly every waking hour. She has fetched water, watched the younger children, repaired clothing, prepared food, cleaned cooking vessels, tended the fire, and possibly earned extra money through sewing, washing, spinning, or taking in other people's laundry. Now she is racing against the darkness. Near the hearth, a pot hangs above the fire. Inside is a meal made from whatever the family can afford, perhaps oats, barley, onions, potatoes later in the century, cabbage, bread, or a thin broth flavored with a small amount of meat. For many laboring families, supper was not a carefully planned meal with several dishes. It was food designed to stretch. Bread might be dipped into broth to make the portion seem larger. Leftovers from earlier in the day could be reheated. Nothing useful was thrown away. The fire is essential, but fuel costs money. Coal, peat, wood, or bundles of sticks must be purchased, collected, or carefully saved. Letting the fire burn too strongly might warm the room, but it would also consume tomorrow's fuel. Mary therefore manages the flames cautiously, adding only enough material to keep the pot hot and the room tolerable. Light is another expense. A wealthy household might burn multiple candles and illuminate several rooms. A working-class family often relied on one small source of light. Beeswax candles were too expensive for most ordinary people. Tallow candles, made from animal fat, were cheaper, but they burned unevenly, produced smoke, and gave off an unpleasant smell. Rushlights offered an even less expensive alternative. These were made by soaking the pith of a rush plant in fat, creating a narrow light that could burn for a limited time. Every minute of artificial light had a cost. Because of this, evening work was organized around necessity. Clothing repairs had to be completed before the flame became too weak. A torn shirt could not simply be replaced. A pair of stockings, trousers, or a child's dress might be patched repeatedly until the original material was difficult to identify. Shoes were repaired and worn long past the point at which modern families would discard them. The children gather close to the hearth. The youngest may be tired, but bedtime is not yet separate from the family's evening routine. There is no brightly lit bedroom waiting upstairs. There may be only one bed, a few straw mattresses, or simple sleeping spaces arranged around the room. Before rest can begin, small responsibilities remain. An older child may be asked to carry in fuel, stir the pot, watch a baby, or prepare bedding. Childhood among working families was not protected from labor. Children learned early that their effort contributed to household survival. Even a task as simple as holding a candle while a parent worked had importance, because a dropped flame could start a devastating fire. Fire was both protector and threat. The hearth provided heat, cooked food, dried clothing, and offered the only reliable center of light. Yet open flames inside cramped homes created constant danger. Sparks could reach straw bedding, wooden furniture, curtains, or clothing. Candles left unattended could overturn. Chimneys that were poorly cleaned might catch fire. In closely packed neighborhoods, one household accident could spread rapidly from building to building. Mary watches the flame almost without thinking. Generations of experience have taught her to treat fire with respect. She moves a wooden stool away from the hearth and warns a child not to lean too close. The warning is ordinary, repeated, and serious. When Thomas finally sits down, his exhaustion is visible. His hands may be swollen or cut. His back aches. If he worked outdoors, the damp has settled into his clothes. If he worked in a workshop, dust and heat may have left him coughing. There is little opportunity for the privacy or silence modern workers might expect after returning home. The family shares the same air, the same heat, and the same limited space. As they eat, conversation may be practical. Thomas reports whether work will be available tomorrow. Mary explains that flour is running low. One child needs new shoes, although the family cannot yet afford them. A neighbor is ill. A landlord has asked about rent. These are not abstract concerns. Each one may determine whether the family remains secure. Even during supper, work continues. Mary may mend clothing between bites. Thomas may inspect a broken tool. One of the children may be expected to rock a cradle or quiet a younger sibling. The household does not shift suddenly from labor to leisure. Instead, labor gradually slows as the available light disappears. Outside, the town becomes harder to navigate. There may be lamps in certain districts, especially in larger cities, but illumination is weak and inconsistent. In poorer areas, streets can become almost completely dark. People who must travel after sunset carry lanterns when they can afford them, walk with companions, or depend on memory to avoid holes, steps, animals, carts, and open drains. Inside the home, the family hears the nighttime world through thin walls and imperfect windows. Footsteps pass outside. A horse moves along the street. Someone shouts in the distance. A nearby door closes. Dogs bark. The sounds are familiar, but darkness gives each one greater weight. The remaining candle is shortened by another inch. Mary knows how long it must last. There may be no replacement until market day or payday. She positions it carefully so its light reaches the table, where the final repair work is being completed. The family's movements become quieter and more deliberate. This is the beginning of night for a working-class household in the 1700s, not a peaceful withdrawal from the day, but a narrow transition between labor and sleep. Darkness limits what the family can do, while also drawing them physically closer together. They have survived another day, but the night presents its own demands. Soon, the pot will be emptied, the fire reduced, and the room rearranged for sleeping. The same space where the family cooked, worked, argued, and ate will become a crowded bedroom. Privacy will almost disappear, and rest will depend on warmth, health, noise, and luck. For now, however, they remain beside the fading fire, watching the last useful light slowly disappear. As the fire settles into a low orange glow, the working-class home begins to change. The table is cleared as well as circumstances allow. Wooden bowls are wiped, scraps are saved, and the cooking pot is moved away from the strongest heat. Nothing in the room is truly transformed, yet almost everything must now serve a new purpose. The place where the family ate supper becomes the place where they prepare for sleep. For many working families in the 18th century, the idea of a private bedroom would have seemed like a luxury. Space cost money, and poor households could rarely afford more of it than they absolutely needed. A family might live in one room, two small rooms, or a cramped section of a larger building shared with other tenants. Parents, children, relatives, apprentices, and paying lodgers could all sleep under the same roof. In Thomas and Mary's home, there is one proper bed. It is not a grand bed with soft linen and thick curtains. Its wooden frame is old and one leg has been repaired. The mattress may be filled with straw, chaff, wool scraps, or feathers if the family has been fortunate. Over time, the filling becomes flattened, lumpy, and damp. It can shelter fleas, lice, and bedbugs, creatures so common that their presence is treated as an unpleasant part of life rather than an extraordinary problem. Thomas and Mary share the bed with the youngest child. The older children sleep nearby on a straw mattress that is unrolled across the floor. Another child may rest on folded cloth, a bench, or a rough pallet position near the hearth. In colder months, sleeping close together has a practical advantage. Human bodies provide warmth. The fire cannot be allowed to burn strongly through the night. Fuel is too valuable and an unattended flame is too dangerous. Before the family lies down, Thomas checks the hearth and pushes the remaining embers together. Mary places ash over part of the fire, hoping that a small amount of heat will survive until morning. If the embers remain alive, relighting the fire at dawn will be easier. If they die, the family must begin again with flint, steel, tinder, and patience. The room grows colder almost immediately. Damp enters through the walls. Air slips around the door and poorly fitted window frames. Glass windows are not universal among the poorest households, and even where glass exists, cracked panes or simple shutters provide limited protection. Heavy fabric, boards, or paper might be used to cover gaps, but the wind still finds its way inside. The family goes to bed wearing much of its clothing. Modern ideas about sleepwear, freshly washed sheets, and heated bedrooms do not fit this world. A person might remove shoes and some outer garments, but keeping a shirt, shift, cap, stockings, or other layers on through the night helps preserve warmth. Clothing is expensive and washed less frequently than modern clothing, especially during winter. Water must be carried, heated, and used carefully. Soap costs money. Drying wet fabric in a damp house can take hours or days. The smell inside the room is therefore a mixture of smoke, cooking grease, damp wool, human sweat, old straw, and the chamber pot kept nearby for nighttime use. Privacy is nearly non-existent. Children hear their parents' conversations. Adults hear every child cough, shift, whisper, or cry. Personal matters cannot easily be separated from family life. Bodies are dressed, washed, nursed, and cared for in shared spaces. The boundaries between childhood and adulthood are shaped less by private rooms and more by custom, authority, and silence. Mary prepares the children for sleep by checking their clothing and brushing dirt from their hands and faces. This is not a full bath. Full-body bathing is difficult in a home without running water or a dedicated bathroom. Instead, families often wash in smaller ways, using a basin and cloth when water is available. The youngest child is restless. Perhaps he has a cough that worsens in the smoky room. Respiratory illness is common in crowded housing, especially where coal smoke, workshop dust, and damp air are part of daily life. Mary listens carefully. A severe fever could become dangerous quickly. Medical care costs money, and many treatments are based on limited knowledge. Families depend heavily on experience, home remedies, neighbors, and hope. She places her palm against the child's forehead. "He feels warmer," she says quietly. Thomas looks toward the boy but offers no immediate answer. He is exhausted, yet the possibility of illness pushes sleep farther away. "Was he eating?" he asks. "A little. Perhaps he will be better by morning." It is a simple sentence, but both parents understand what remains unspoken. Illness can mean more than discomfort. If Mary must spend tomorrow caring for a sick child, other household work will suffer. If Thomas becomes ill, the family may lose its income. If medicine is needed, food or fuel may have to be sacrificed. Working-class households live close to the edge, and nighttime often makes that vulnerability impossible to ignore. During the day, labor provides distraction. At night, worries become more visible. Rent is due soon. Bread is expensive. One child's shoes have nearly worn through. Thomas has heard that work may slow during the coming week. Mary has promised to complete sewing for a neighbor, but the weak evening light has made progress difficult. They discuss these matters in low voices while the children pretend to sleep. The conversation is not dramatic. There are no speeches about poverty or injustice. Instead, there are calculations. How much flour remains? Could they buy cheaper oats? Might Thomas ask for an advance? Could Mary take in more washing? Should they delay paying one debt to settle another? This quiet arithmetic governs survival. Yet the night is not filled only with anxiety. Before the last candle is extinguished, the older children sometimes ask for a story. Thomas may repeat a tale he heard from his own father, perhaps about a foolish farmer, a clever servant, a distant battle, or a traveler who escaped danger through courage and common sense. The details change with each telling. The story requires no purchased object. It needs no printed page, though inexpensive books, pamphlets, and ballads are becoming more common during the century. Oral storytelling remains part of household life, carrying humor, warnings, family memories, and local history from one generation to the next. Mary may sing a familiar verse while settling the youngest child. Her voice is low so that neighbors are not disturbed. Through the wall, another family can sometimes be heard speaking or moving. In densely occupied buildings, no household is completely alone. Children learn through these nighttime moments. They hear which neighbors can be trusted. They learn why food must not be wasted and why fire must be respected. They are told where not to walk after dark. They absorb family stories about hard winters, lost work, illness, marriage, and migration. Education in a laboring household does not occur only in a schoolroom. It happens through repeated instruction, observation, correction, and responsibility. An older daughter watches Mary fold cloth and understands that tomorrow she will help with the washing. A son studies Thomas's damaged work tool and knows that one day he may use something similar. The children are being prepared not for an abstract future, but for the same demanding world their parents already inhabit. Eventually the candle must be put out. Thomas pinches the flame or uses a simple extinguisher. A thin line of smoke rises from the wick. For a moment, the room still holds the image of the family: the bed, the table, the suspended pot, the worn clothing, the pale faces. Then darkness takes everything. The room is not entirely silent. Straw shifts beneath sleeping bodies. Floorboards creak. Someone coughs. A baby makes a small sound and is comforted. Rats may move behind a wall or near stored food. Wind presses against the window covering. Sleep itself may come in stages. Many people in pre-industrial societies did not always expect an uninterrupted 8-hour period of rest. A person might sleep for several hours, wake during the night, and return to sleep later. During this interval, adults could pray, speak quietly, check the fire, tend a child, or complete a minor task. For a working family, however, waking in the night is not necessarily peaceful. Cold may force someone to pull clothing tighter. A crying child may disturb everyone. Street noise may signal danger. A cough may continue for hours. An insect bite may make rest impossible. The arrangement of bodies also creates discomfort. Children kick or roll against one another. The straw mattress rustles. A parent wakes whenever the youngest child moves. If one family member is sick, every other person shares the same enclosed air. Despite this, the crowded room also offers security. A frightened child can reach a parent without leaving the bed. A suspicious noise is heard by everyone. When the cold intensifies, the family gathers closer. In a world where darkness conceals danger and material comfort is scarce, physical closeness becomes a form of protection. This is one of the central contradictions of working-class nighttime life in the 1700s. The same lack of space that creates discomfort also creates connection. The same shared room that eliminates privacy ensures that no person faces illness, fear, or winter cold entirely alone. Family members know one another's weaknesses because they cannot avoid them. They witness exhaustion, anger, tenderness, hunger, and grief at close range. Long after midnight, Mary wakes again. The child beside her is breathing unevenly. She adjusts the blanket and listens until the breathing settles. Across the room, one of the older children whispers in a dream. Thomas sleeps heavily, his hands still roughened from the day's labor. Outside, footsteps pass along the street. Mary remains still until the sound disappears. She does not know whether it was a neighbor, a watchman, a drunk laborer, or someone searching for an unguarded door. The wooden latch is in place, but it offers only limited protection. Beyond the walls lies a nighttime world of dark alleys, taverns, animals, open drains, thieves, and travelers moving without reliable light. That world will form the next part of the family's night. For now, Mary closes her eyes again and draws the child closer. Around her, the crowded household breathes in the darkness, waiting for dawn. Outside the family's home, the 18th century night has its own geography. The street Thomas crossed only a few hours earlier is no longer the same place. In daylight, it is crowded, noisy, and familiar. Merchants call from stalls. Carts pass between pedestrians. Children run errands. Laborers move between workshops, docks, markets, and homes. After sunset, those ordinary landmarks begin to disappear. The uneven road becomes a dark surface broken by puddles, stones, animal waste, open drains, and deep wheel ruts. Wooden signs creak above shop doors. Shutters are closed. The faces of buildings merge into one long wall of shadow. Even people who have lived in the neighborhood for years must walk slowly and carefully. Street lighting exists in some 18th century towns and cities, but it is weak, irregular, and far from universal. In wealthier districts, householders may be required to hang lamps outside their properties. Larger streets might have oil lamps maintained by local authorities or private contractors. Yet these lights illuminate only small circles around themselves. Between them, darkness remains. In poorer neighborhoods, there may be no reliable public lighting at all. Anyone forced to travel after dark must carry a lantern, pay someone to guide the way, or trust memory and luck. A candle inside a lantern gives only limited protection. Wind can weaken it. Rain can extinguish it. Oil is expensive, and carrying a visible light may reveal that the traveler possesses something worth stealing. For a working-class family, the safest nighttime journey is often the one that can be avoided. Thomas and Mary understand this. Their door has been closed and latched, and there is no reason to open it unless something urgent happens. Yet necessity does not always respect the darkness. A child may become seriously ill. A woman may go into labor. A worker may be required to begin before sunrise. A messenger may arrive with news of an accident. A family member may be delayed at work or fail to return home. On this night, the youngest child's cough becomes harsher. Mary wakes again and sits beside him. His breathing is quick and heat rises from his forehead. She gives him a little water, but he turns away. Thomas is awake now, listening from the edge of the bed. "Should we fetch Mrs. Carter?" Mary asked. Mrs. Carter is not a formally trained physician. She is an older widow who lives several streets away and has helped local families through births, fevers, injuries, and childhood illnesses. Her knowledge comes from experience, observation, and remedies passed between generations. Thomas hesitates. Leaving the house means entering the street alone. Bringing a doctor, if one can be found and paid, may cost more than the family possesses. Doing nothing may be dangerous. This is how many working families make decisions in the 18th century, not by choosing between a good option and a bad one, but by measuring one risk against another. Thomas dresses without fully removing the clothes he wore to sleep. He pulls on his worn boots and reaches for the small lantern. Mary lights it from one of the surviving embers, protecting the weak flame with her hand. "Go quickly," she tells him. He lifts the latch. Cold air immediately enters the room. For a moment, the open doorway frames the narrow street. There is no moon visible through the clouds. Rainwater shines faintly in the lantern light. Somewhere nearby, a man laughs loudly, followed by the sound of a bottle breaking. Thomas steps outside and closes the door behind him. The light from his lantern reaches only a few feet. He knows the route to Mrs. Carter's house, but every obstacle is harder to judge at night. He passes a cart left too close to the wall and nearly steps into a gutter filled with dirty water. Sanitation in working-class neighborhoods is poor. Waste may be thrown into streets or collected in open channels. Animals move freely through some areas. Human waste stored in chamber pots must eventually be carried away or emptied. During heavy rain, refuse spreads across roads and into doorways. At night, these conditions become more dangerous because they are difficult to see. A careless step can lead to a fall, a broken ankle, or contact with contaminated water. In winter, ice creates additional risks. A worker injured at night may be unable to earn wages the next morning, turning a simple accident into a financial crisis for the entire family. Thomas walks near the buildings where he feels less exposed. A figure approaches from the opposite direction. Thomas tightens his grip on the lantern. The stranger's face remains hidden until they are only a few steps apart. It is a watchman. In many towns, night watchmen patrol streets, call out the hour, report fires, and confront suspicious behavior. Their effectiveness varies greatly. Some are respected. Others are poorly paid, elderly, inattentive, or easily avoided. They cannot be everywhere, and their presence does not make the streets completely safe. The watchman recognizes Thomas and raises his staff slightly in greeting. "Late to be out," he says. "My boy is ill." The watchman nods toward the end of the street. "Keep away from the tavern corner. There's been fighting." Thomas thanks him and continues. Taverns are among the brightest places still open, but their light does not always represent safety. Inside, workers, travelers, sailors, servants, and strangers drink, gamble, exchange news, and seek relief from difficult lives. Taverns can provide warmth, food, companionship, and employment. They can also produce arguments, theft, and violence. The 18th century night is shaped by alcohol. Beer and ale are common drinks, partly because brewing can make water safer to consume, though strength and quality vary. Gin becomes especially associated with social disorder in parts of 18th century London, where cheap spirits are widely available. Drunkenness is not limited to the poor, but working-class districts often suffer its most visible consequences. As Thomas approaches the corner, he hears shouting. Two men stand in the road while several others watch from a doorway. One man pushes the other. A woman calls for them to stop. Thomas lowers his head and crosses to the opposite side. He has no desire to become involved. For a working man, even a minor confrontation can be costly. A damaged tool, torn coat, broken tooth, or injured hand may affect his ability to work. If he is arrested, the family loses both income and support. Survival often depends not on winning a fight, but on avoiding one. He passes unnoticed. Farther ahead, the street becomes quieter. The lantern flame flickers as the wind moves between the buildings. Thomas shields it with his coat. This small light is his only protection against the physical darkness, but it cannot reveal every threat. Theft is a real concern, especially in larger cities. Pickpockets, burglars, highwaymen, and street robbers appear frequently in 18th century newspapers and public fears. The danger is sometimes exaggerated in popular stories, Yet ordinary people have good reasons to remain cautious. Policing is limited, and many legal systems depend on victims, witnesses, watchmen, constables, and private citizens to identify and pursue offenders. A locked door is therefore extremely important. Back at the house, Mary has secured the latch again. She sits beside the child while the older children sleep nearby. Every sound from the street seems closer in Thomas's absence. A hand against the door would wake her immediately. Burglars do not need sophisticated tools to enter many working-class homes. Doors are made from wood, windows may be poorly secured, and walls between rented rooms can be thin. Yet criminals also know that poor households contain little worth stealing. This offers some protection but not complete safety. A thief may take food, clothing, tools, candles, or a few saved coins. To a wealthy person these objects may seem insignificant. To Thomas and Mary, losing them could be devastating. A stolen tool can prevent a man from working. A missing coat can make winter labor unbearable. A small amount of money may represent the family's rent or food for several days. Fire is an even greater fear. A cry of "fire" during the night can bring an entire street awake. 18th century towns contain closely built houses made with large amounts of timber. Roofs, furniture, floorboards, and stored materials can burn rapidly. Open hearths, candles, lanterns, workshops, and ovens create many possible sources of ignition. If a fire begins, families may have only moments to escape. Organized firefighting is developing in some cities, including private fire brigades connected to insurance companies, but protection is inconsistent. Buckets, hooks, ladders, hand-operated pumps, and neighborhood cooperation are still essential. Working people often live in the buildings most vulnerable to fire and have the least ability to replace what is lost. Mary glances toward the covered embers. The hearth appears safe, but she checks it again. A single spark reaching the straw bedding could destroy everything. The family's relationship with fire is therefore deeply contradictory. Without it, they cannot cook or survive the cold. With it, they can never feel entirely secure. Thomas finally reaches Mrs. Carter's door and knocks softly. There is no answer. He knocks again, louder this time. A window opens above him. "Who is it?" a tired voice asks. "Thomas Miller. My youngest is feverish. His breathing is bad." A pause follows. Then the window closes and after several minutes the door opens. Mrs. Carter appears wearing a heavy shawl over her nightclothes. She carries a small basket containing cloth, dried herbs, and a few basic supplies. She does not complain. In working-class communities, survival often depends on this kind of informal support. Neighbors watch children, share food, lend fuel, help during births, care for the sick, and provide information about work. These relationships are not always peaceful. People argue over noise, debts, property, and gossip. Yet when danger arrives, cooperation can become essential. Thomas carries the lantern while Mrs. Carter walks beside him. They avoid the tavern corner. The fighting has ended, but one man now sits against a wall with blood on his face. No one appears eager to help him. The watchman is farther down the road, speaking to another group. Mrs. Carter glances at the injured man but continues walking. Her responsibility tonight is to the sick child. When they reach the house, Mary opens the door before Thomas can knock. She has been listening for his footsteps. Mrs. Carter moves directly to the bed. She touches the child's forehead, listens to his breathing, and asks Mary several questions. Has he eaten? Has he vomited? How long has he been coughing? Is the cough dry or wet? Her methods are limited by the medical knowledge of the period. Some traditional remedies may provide comfort. Others may be ineffective or harmful. The causes of infection are not fully understood, and antibiotics do not exist. Still, careful nursing can make a difference. Mrs. Carter tells Mary to keep the child warm but not too tightly covered. She asks for clean water and recommends that the room receive a little fresh air, even though the night is cold. She prepares a mild drink and advises the parents to watch his breathing closely. If it worsens before dawn, she says, "Send for me again." Mary thanks her. Thomas offers a small coin, but Mrs. Carter closes his hand around it. "Keep it for bread," she says. "You can help me another time." This exchange reveals something often lost in descriptions of 18th century poverty. Working-class life is difficult, but it is not without generosity. People who possess very little still lend time, knowledge, labor, and food to one another. The family's security is not created only by locks or watchmen. It is created by relationships. Thomas escorts Mrs. Carter home and returns without incident. By the time he closes the door again, the lantern has nearly burned out. Mary sits beside the youngest child, whose breathing has become slightly calmer. The older children are awake now. Will he be all right? One asks. Mary gives the only honest answer she can. We will watch him. The children settle again, though none falls asleep immediately. The night moves slowly. Beyond the walls, the town continues its hidden life. Bakers begin work long before dawn. Servants rise to prepare wealthy households. Market sellers arrange goods. Carters load wagons. Watchmen call the hour. Criminals disappear into alleys and tired drinkers stumble home. Night does not stop labor. It only changes who is working and why. Inside the family's room, Thomas adds a small piece of fuel to the hearth. It is more than they intended to burn, but the sick child needs warmth. Tomorrow they will have less. Every act of care carries a cost. Mary watches the boy while Thomas sits beside her. Their shoulders almost touch. They do not speak. There is nothing useful left to say. Near morning the fever begins to ease. The change is slight, but Mary notices it. The child's breathing becomes more regular and his face is less tense. She closes her eyes for a moment, overcome by relief and exhaustion. Outside, the darkness softens. The first gray light appears above the rooftops. It reveals the same street Thomas crossed during the night, the broken road, the gutter, the shuttered shops, and the tavern door. Nothing has changed, yet everything feels less threatening now that it can be seen. Soon the family will rise. Thomas must prepare for work despite having slept very little. Mary will continue caring for the child while completing as many household tasks as possible. The older children will fetch water, carry messages, clean, or work according to their age and circumstances. There is no full recovery from the night. Its exhaustion enters the next day. This was nighttime for countless working-class families in the 1700s. It was cold, crowded, and uncertain. It exposed people to fire, illness, crime, accidents, and financial danger. It offered little privacy and no guarantee of uninterrupted sleep. Darkness transformed familiar streets into hazardous territory and made even simple decisions more serious. Yet the night also revealed the strength of ordinary relationships. Families shared warmth because there was not enough fuel. They shared beds because there was not enough space. Neighbors offered help because formal support was limited. Parents remained awake beside sick children even when morning labor could not be postponed. Their lives were not romantic or comfortable. Their hardships should not be reduced to charming images of candlelight and old cottages. But neither were these families defined only by suffering. Within cramped rooms and poorly lit streets, they created routines, told stories, protected children, exchanged favors, and endured uncertainty together. They found security not in technology or wealth, but in familiarity, cooperation, and the knowledge that survival depended on people noticing when someone else needed help. For a modern audience, especially one accustomed to electric light, heated rooms, private bedrooms, emergency services, and medicine available at any hour, the 18th century night can feel almost impossibly distant. But its central lesson remains recognizable. Comfort changes across centuries. Fear changes its form. The tools people use to protect themselves become more advanced. Still, when darkness arrives and certainty disappears, human beings often depend on the same things they always have: trust, resilience, and the presence of someone willing to remain awake beside them until morning.